Who's been at the shop of late will have seen a Norton CS1 up on the stand, and David purchased that in 2012, thereabouts, at the Vegas auction. That's what it looked like. Oh, I should backtrack. In starting a restoration of something like this, a 1928 Norton, normally create a file of what it was, pictures of what's on there, find different information out, parts books, the manuals for the era, sales brochures, to know what the thing actually looked like in 1928. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's really hard. So this is what David bought. That's how we got it back to Phoenix, in the back of a van. There's the proud owner. So this thing has been 6 years in the making. I mean, there's other pictures here of different examples so that we could know what we were building. As I say, you find instruction manuals, parts books, and information. The other thing you need to find is manuals. Now, people will often just get one book. It says the Book of the Norton from 1926 to 1948 or something. But it depends which edition you buy. So the later edition will be more focused on, say, the 1948 Norton than it was on the 26 Norton. And if you ever bought an AJS single book by Neil, and you bought the pinky covered, soft covered book, you often read through that and it just doesn't make sense. Because what they did at those times was, as they edited the books for the more modern machines, they cut chunks out of the older machines. So there's like 3 pages missing, it appears. So you've got the Book of the Norton, they're by different authors, and there's Norton motorcycles, again, different authors. Each one of these contains information on the CS1, but none of them has everything on it. So when you're looking at manuals, and you're looking at buying the books that were done by Pitmans, there's a lot that were done. Haycraft wrote a huge amount of books on different manufacturers. They've all got different information in it. So what you want to do is find the edition that is closest to the year that your bike was actually in production, and then it will have all the information you need, supposedly. So to build this bike, we needed a minimum of these 3 books, plus the manuals in there and the parts book. So we normally keep a book in the shop. It gets rather well worn and fingerprinted with oily marks all over it. So we make copies so that we can refer to that without damaging the actual valuable literature. When you're actually restoring a bike, you can come across a few horror stories like we did with this bike, because we didn't start it, because we were a little dubious about what it could be like, and it could be rather expensive if everything just went bang. So when we got it back to Winnipeg, the motor and gearbox came up to my place, stripped it, and found a number of horror stories. And surprisingly, good items, like the barrel is still a standard bore in perfect condition. The cam drive was absolutely knackered, to put it politely. So, one of the first things we had to do, that Dave had to fork out for, was a set of bevels to drive the cam. These are bottom bevels, and there's a hell of a lot of wear on these. There are teeth welded on, not very well, and they shouldn't be sharp. These are sharp because you have, when you set a set of bevels up, you have to mesh them for clearance, so there's no backlash. Well, there's all sorts of backlash on these the way it was set up, and the mounting that held the bottom bevel, the threads were totally shot into the crankcase. We had to re-center everything, line it all up to make it work. But making bevels, Dave found a place in Winnipeg that made them. He's not talking about how much it cost him, because they weren't cheap. Then there's other parts of the motor were in varying states of condition. We had to replace, make, shim, sleeve, all sorts of parts to get the motor back together. Now, when they made the gears, they're obviously keyed and onto the shaft, and they've got to be timed. So, if you look carefully at the bottom bevel here, there are a couple of center pops that this other gear meshes into to give you the correct timing. When they remade the gears, obviously they didn't take any notice of the center pops or the marks. So the alignment they had with the spline and this was very slightly up. And so it had to be shimmed up and altered so that you could actually pull it back just under half a tooth to get the measurement, to get the cam right. So it took a long time to get that motor back together. Other problems, bear in mind this is a 1928 machine, is the lay shaft and the gearbox. Simple enough, except this one was made out of two, welded up. That's not so serious, but it's been cut down, sort of the right length, and sort of the right shape. But then they got a sleeve gear that was the same size as the shaft, but in order for it to be the same size, what they did was they left out the bushings. So this was running steel on steel. Hence big grooves in the shaft. Finding replacements, not easy. So that took a while. And then the other part of the gearbox that was a bit of a horror story was the outer cover. Now this has the hand change attached here, which is sort of down by your foot. All the kickstart have been welded up. There are major fractures in the cover and around the kickstart. So this wasn't good, except that this is rocking horse duty, because most of them, gearboxes of that time, the hand change didn't attach to the gearbox, but attached to the frame. So this was a one-off, 1 year only. So in order to replace this, what we had to do was buy a cover that was cut off at this point, exactly the same shape, everything else is identical, and then fabricate the top, weld it on, and then re-drill it so it works. So that's what we've got now. So those are some of the little interesting parts that make restoring 20s bikes fun. As you can see, my idea of fun is a little twisted. But the outcome of this is on Sunday, we actually wheeled the bike out of the garage and proceeded to kick the living daylights out of it. Because we'd had to have a chain case made, cast in aluminium, and unfortunately it was rubbing a bit, so it was slowing, when I was kicking the bike over, it was slowing it down. So we took the top of the chain case off, and what happened? First kick after that,
I can prove it too.
listen, here is the sound of a 1928 CS1 Norton actually run.
Cool.
And that is the first time that we've actually heard that bike run since we brought it home 6 years ago. This particular motor was designed by Walter Moore for Norton. And when he wasn't made a director, he took umbrage and he left Norton and went to NSU. And he took that design with him because he said he designed it in his own time. So an NSU cami appeared very shortly after he joined NSU. And surprisingly enough, it looked very similar. So everyone said that NSU stood for Norton Spares Used. But then Carroll redesigned the motor, which became known as the International and the Manx Norton, and that's what everyone is familiar with. This motor is known as the cricket bat motor for obvious reasons because of the shape of the cam drum. It's great.
No fun without the sound.
The surprising thing about starting that bike was we put a straight through exhaust on it, and it was quiet, relatively.
Yeah.
It wasn't blowing your eardrums off.
Yeah.
What compression ratio is that?
About 7.5.
We didn't get it much above, I don't know.
So, does anyone recognize the mystery part?
It's the gate latch off the compound where you store your...
Close!
It's something to do with the shifter and the gearbox, isn't it?
Nope. Nobody?
It's an oil pump part here, devil here.
It is an oil pump. It is one oil pump, which is a reciprocating plunger pump.
That pumps oil.
Huh? In theory, it
Not
does.
very well.
We have to prove that.
Yeah. This pump itself was not in good condition, put it that way. And so we found someone who'd made some pumps. Except when I tried to put the pump together, the new retainer, this brass part, is drilled at the wrong position. And there's no way on earth you could re-drill it to make it work. And it was a bit sloppy. So I could, in the end, I replaced the plunger of the pump, which was screwed, this one, into the old bronze housing, and that's what's in the bike now. But, yeah,
So what's it for, John?
it's for a CS1.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
So I doubt whether anyone will, in this space, will ever see a CS1 oil pump again.
Unless they go to your place.
Yeah.